to take advantage of moves, but still having a well-defined risk, right? There's a difference between taking a trade, letting it play out, and kind of just hoping and praying that something happens. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But for now, let's go ahead and get started and go over the market. Good afternoon. This is Ifan from the Strategic Day Trader, and this is your market wrap for May 24th, 2019. We have a little less than an hour left in the market. If you were to watch it, it does look like the market's closed based on how little it's moving, but it's just settling down here. Very quiet day. Qs are up just barely 0.15% at the moment, and SPY up 1/3% there. So you can see that the market tried to gap up and then got sold. So to recap, coming into today, we had a bearish bias on the Qs and SPY. You can see it gapped up and then got sold. Really doesn't change anything based on what we got today. We got this narrow body bar here on the Qs and SPY. We said over this is where we will change our bias. Okay, so we're not really anywhere near that. Over 287 on the SPY, and then over this on the Qs, 182.33. We'll change our bias to a neutral bias, but for now we're gonna remain bearish because that is what the faster moving time frames are telling us, that we are moving lower. So this is the hourly, right, which we use to predict the next hours and days. Looking at the daily for the next days and weeks, that's also moved into a downtrend. Where the conflict is that we have a weekly that's setting up a buy setup on the weekly here. So potentially next week, if we break above 182.33, that could trigger a buy setup in the weekly, and that's where we will switch to a neutral bias. Okay, and then monthly, you can see, has just started this downtrend after a very nice move up. Okay, so same bias going into tomorrow, bearish, or not tomorrow, but Tuesday after we get back. Tuesday, bearish bias unless we get over the numbers outlined. And the reason that it's important that we go over it, even though maybe it's unlikely that we get a big move, is that news has been occurring. We're still waiting for some kind of resolution on kind of the trade conflict or trade negotiations. So you could get a big gap up. It's just something we want to be prepared for. On a big gap down to support, right? This is the support area we're looking for, around 175. Could be a buying opportunity if we get a big gap down like that. The more likely scenario is that we get some variation on Tuesday of what we got today, which is narrow body bar, because we've had this increase of volatility. So we're expecting to see a little bit of calming down here like we got today. You can see the volume today, pretty low, below average day here. So surprisingly, even though the market really didn't do much today, I thought there were some pretty good opportunities today, especially to the long side. It's something that hopefully you've picked up on over time, is that when we get a big move in the market, one way or the other, we're usually looking for gaps in the other direction. So yesterday was a pretty significant down day in the market. So I would expect gap ups today to get more follow through, because they will possess more shock value and potentially more shorts trapped or longs that got shaken out, who will have to get back into their position. So, things like the TSS, nice gap up, nice follow through. We'll talk about that a little bit more. The SC was a pretty impressive gap up. The APHA was a gap up. So I saw a lot more follow through to the upside today with the gap ups. Something I wanted to talk about, though, is we've seen kind of a little bit in the last few days, and part of it is luck, right? I gave this MAXR idea as a long in here, right? And it never took out the stop, and then news came out, and this got this big move up, right, on the MAXR. And I do think, right, I not that I knew that this deal or that they were going to be receiving the contract that they got was in play. It was just showing a lot of relative strength, right? You saw what the market was doing, was in an all-out downtrend after a gap down. This actually recovered and was up on the day, right? So this was telling you path of least resistance is to the upside. There's something going on here. It is very strong. Now, today the TSS was called in the room. Sammy had a call in the TSS, right? You can see the similarities here. This was a gap up, stayed pretty strong, right? And then they got this nice move up. I think they covered some, I think around 113, and then they actually shorted it because it went climactic off of the highs underneath 117. But it's something that I think is important to keep in mind. It's not that everything we play, we expect that this will happen. I mean, that would be great. But it's important to put yourself in the position that when it does, you can take advantage. And I know some people kind of maybe gave up on it because they got impatient with it and then weren't in it for this pop. But it's the kind of thing that when you play something, most of the time it's not going to do that. If you did this SC, right, which I gave you the numbers on the SC to be played over this base, most of the time they're going to do this kind of grind higher if they work, right? And that's, I'm playing the gap. Same thing with the urban, right, which I had a good discussion with someone yesterday in coaching because he kind of got impatient with the urban. We had played the urban on a breakdown here, and he gave up on it because it was, I guess, basing, and he kind of just got impatient with it, right? But if you were sticking with the management that I had called, that I was managing for you, right? We were in it until the last piece, which we got rid of around 24.20, right? And so it was a very tight stop, and that can make a big difference. And I think for him, unfortunately, on this day was the difference between a positive day and a negative day. And sometimes you'll get out of it early. It's not going to work. That's fine, right? You'll get a little bit lucky in that way. But what I primarily want to do, right, with this something like this urban, which is showing me this weakness, right, it was on the gap down, is I want to stay in it. Because if, something comes up, right, like the TSS, then you have a lot more to the upside, right, to gain multiples of an R, right? And your downside is already measured. Now, barring, a big move down that like skips over your stop or something like that, which is pretty rare, or like it gets halted and then opens or something like that, very rare. Typically, if you're playing in with the trend, that is the path of least resistance, and that's the path that usually news will push the symbol, right, or push the stock. So it's one of those things that I've seen a little bit more lately, right? And here's what it would look like maybe to the downside. Now notice this. What has this been doing? This tried to move up and then has been basing at the lows. So when the move occurs, right, what should be the expectation? That it's going to come in hard, right? Same thing, TSS moved up and then has been basing right above the low, still up on the day. The difference between this JAG coming back in, this actually, right, lost, it went negative on the day, right? Couldn't hold its gains, right? So there's a little bit of a difference in the way that these kind of retrace their morning move, right? And this never gave away the lows either. Okay, so, we have, as long as we have that risk defined, if we're wrong, then, fine, you lose an R, maybe a fraction of an R if you already took some, but you want to be in a position to take advantage of something like this. This kind of stuff can really strike at any time and is going to happen more often for those of us that are playing in the direction of the trend along the path of least resistance. There will be reversals, there will be news that comes out, things can happen, right? But more often than not. Okay, so I just wanted to highlight this very nice call from Sammy on the TSS in both directions, right? And then I know some people played the MAXR yesterday and had some nice plays on it, the MAXR higher. I don't know if anybody's short. I guess there was potential for this to be played as a short, maybe right here, but really short-lived as far as the move down. So really, this wasn't called in any way as a short, but it was a pretty big move up. Only given out as a long idea on the MAXR. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that I think we as traders have to keep in mind, the reward to risk. And, it's not a bad thing to get lucky from time to time, right? And just kind of be optimistic. It's one of the things that I remind myself and I remind people in the room, that, the things that are working, the gains that you have, right, should always be expecting more, right? Because we're only going to be limited to the upside by our own kind of imagination. Now, that doesn't mean you have to hold every winner until it comes all the way down and you give the whole thing back, right? But if you play this INTU, you can take half here, right? And then just try to stick with it until end of the day. If you want to manage hourly bar by bar like I do, that's what kept us in. If you played the PSTG with me the other day, we were in it right essentially until the close. Got in it as it broke down and just kind of stuck with it as long as we could. Didn't take out the hourly bar there. If you did the same approach here on the SC, right? So I know it's hard. Giving back profits is definitely painful. So, if you get to, this went up 2 Rs pretty quick. You can go ahead and take half and then, see if it continues to make new highs. That's what it looks like it's going to do. And then if good news comes out or anything like that, then all the better. And if bad news comes out, then you just get trailed out and it's already locked in as a profitable trade, right? That's the kind of thing that we kind of have to constantly be looking to do. We're managing our risk, but also putting ourselves in a position to take advantage of opportunity, right? And so that's something that I think we should always keep in mind, okay? Especially when we start to see a little bit more of this kind of stuff. I think the GPN is related to the TSS. I think there's news of them merging, but someone in the room also mentioned this base here on the GPN, right? Basing here and then nice follow through. Now, if the GPN didn't work, you take a stop. Your loss is well defined to one risk unit, but you have multiples to gain. Okay, so of course it's always good to be lucky, but at the same time, it's all about putting ourselves in a position to be lucky with a measured and well-defined risk. Okay. All right, so that is gonna do it. I know we're wrapping up here a little bit early. Still have some time here before the market closes. Looks like we're probably getting closer and closer to flat. We may even go negative on the day. Either way, I don't draw a big distinction between whether we close here or down a little bit. I think today, just a kind of narrow range day, and it doesn't change our bias. We are staying weak here on the Qs and SPY. Right, we know where what kind of move to the upside would make us change our bias. So I'm okay with going over the bias a little bit early ahead of the close here. Okay, and just getting you prepared for Tuesday's price action. Okay, hope you did well today. Hope you did well this week. If not, take some time this weekend to review, make sure everything is logged correctly, and see what adjustments you need to make for next week, and we'll see what the market brings us. All right, enjoy your long weekend, and I will talk to you on Tuesday.